I have spent most of my professional life as a chaplain in institutions. I came to Topeka to study out at the Menninger Foundation. I worked at the state hospital, was a chaplain at K&I for handicapped children and youth for a number of years, and spent almost the last 20 years at what we used to call Boys Industrial School, the youth center at Topeka. I have been around people with problems for quite a while. But the thing I have learned more than anything else in my years of being a chaplain and in my years of being alive is that people in institutions are not the only ones that have problems. As I see some of my friends here today, I know some of you who have experienced some pretty rough things in life. Now, I'm not talking about the dishwasher overflowing or the car leaking oil. I'm talking about the kind of problems where you sit some morning with your head in your hands and you say to yourself and anybody else that might be hearing, I don't know if I can go on anymore. I have tried everything and it seems to be at a dead end. I feel like giving up. There may be some of you who have experienced those kinds of things in life, the death of a loved one, the splitting of an important relationship, health concerns, and there are many other things. There may be someone sitting next to you here this morning that is sitting here with those feelings of, is it worth it anymore? I have the feeling, and this is why I like this scripture so much, that Isaiah knew what those kinds of problems in life were all about. And he had what he found to be a solution that I would like to sort of share with you today. He says, those that hope in the Lord, those that wait upon the Lord, those that trust in the Lord will renew their strength. And then he gives us three little examples of how that happens. He says, first of all, they will mount up on wings as eagles. I would have thought maybe Isaiah came from Kansas. Any of you ever been over to Lake Clinton or along the river and been fortunate enough to see in the early sun morning or late in the evening those eagles as they soar around catching the updrafts of the air? A gorgeous sight. Isaiah says, those that trust in the Lord, even in these hard times of life, will mount up on wings as eagles. Now, why is that important? I'd like to tell you a quick story. A friend of mine, another Baptist minister who lives back in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania now, loves to tell about his ancestors because his family was from Canada. And his great-grandfather was involved with the Canadian Railroad in building their version of the railroad across the continent. Now, they didn't do it like we did here in the United States. They didn't start a bunch of people on the East Coast and a bunch of people on the West Coast, and where was it, in Utah somewhere, they finally met and happened to get the two rails to hook together. Canada was not quite as developed and not quite as heavily populated even. And so they started on the East Coast. And they just started going across the country building a railroad. Now, my friend's great-grandfathers had a special job along with about 5 or 6 other men on this crew that was building the railroad, because as they got nearer and nearer the mountainous area like our Rockies, his job was a railroad scout. Now, they didn't have detailed maps. There weren't cities. So it was the job of the scouts to ride out days ahead of the crew that was building the rails, sleeping overnight in the cars of the train that carried the materials, and they were slowly building the tracks, but the scouts would ride out days ahead, follow the creeks and the streams, finding a route that they could build the tracks. Then they would come back to the workers and say, all right, when we get up here, we're going to veer off to the north, or we're going to go. They sort of did it as they went. My friend says his great-grandfather told once as they were out riding, searching for the path, they noticed that on either side of them, far in the distance, were these sheer sides of mountain cliffs. But as they rode, the cliffs started coming closer and closer together. And they began to get worried. And they realized they were in a huge canyon. Hundreds, if not thousands of feet on either side of them. And as they rode further and further on their horses, it got narrower and narrower. Until finally they came to a spot and they looked ahead, and there, half a mile or so in front of them, was a sheer cliff, hundreds of feet high. They were stuck, a dead end. They had nowhere to go. And as they sat there on their horses, the reality began to hit them that they were going to have to go back to those workers and tell them the bad news that maybe days or even weeks of hard labor laying railroad tracks was wasted, and they were going to have to back up and find a different route because they were in an impossible situation. His grandfather and the other men looked at each other and they didn't even want to say the words. They sat there on their horses for a minute, and as they sat there in silence, one of them noticed that up above them was an eagle flying in circles. It was sort of a diversion from their problem of the moment, so they watched. And the eagle flew and flew, and as he flew, he kept going closer and closer to the end of that box canyon. So the men urged their horses to go along and just sort of see what was going to happen. Was the eagle going to try to get up high enough to go over? Or was he going to finally turn around, or was the eagle going to just land and quit? And as they followed the eagle a ways, they got nearer and nearer the end of that canyon. And they watched as the eagle circled and finally went behind a high shelf of rocks. And they waited. And they waited. And they didn't see him go up over the top. But he didn't come back. And their curiosity got them, so they urged their horses down to the very edge of this canyon. And there, where the eagle had gone behind the rocks that they hadn't seen before, was an opening. And it was wide enough that they were able to go through. And when they went through, they came out the other side and found that they were on the other side of what we call the Continental Divide. They had made it through the mountains. But they hadn't seen the way. But the eagle, in his power and in his viewpoint from up above, could see that there was a way, even though they didn't know it. Isaiah said that when we have problems in living, if we wait upon the Lord, it will renew our strength. We can mount up on wings as eagles. There is a way. He also said that you can run and not get weary. Now that one sort of hurts. For me, a little jog to the mailbox tires me out for the afternoon. Some of you look a little healthier than that. I remember quite a few years ago now, my two daughters and my wife and I were out in Colorado for a week. And when you're traveling, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but when one man is alone traveling with three women, we were in Vail, and I was sitting in the motel room watching television while they were shopping. The last thing I wanted to do was go to a bunch of clothing stores. And it happened to be during the time of the Summer Olympics. Now, this was a number of years ago. I remember I was sort of intrigued by one of the events that they kept showing. It was the marathon. I don't even know how long it is, 20-some miles? 20. These people run, and they go up the hills and through towns. And it happened to be that year an American won. Unusual. Usually it's one of the African runners. But this young man, he was the scrawniest looking thing. And he wore a baseball cap, and I think they called him Bird something. He looked like he was skin and bones. But as he was running, he was a favorite, but the people liked him. But as he was running, he took the lead. And at the final part of the race, they come into this mammoth stadium with hundreds of thousands of people and run one lap around the quarter mile and cross the finish line. And he crossed the finish line before the next runner even got into the stadium. And the crowd was just going crazy. And I'm sitting there watching TV, drinking my iced tea, and I'm thinking, boy, that's a lot of running. And I said, boy, he's going to fall over dead. But when he passed the finish line, he ran over to the stadium where one of his friends was seated and handed him an American flag. And he took that American flag and he ran clear around the track again. And I thought, where did he get that energy? Now, I have a feeling that's sort of what Isaiah was talking about when he said, sometimes in life when you sort of get that feeling like it's time to quit, those that wait on the Lord can run and not get weary. The stamina, the wanting to, the desire, the belief that it can be done can come from a power greater than us. And God will help us find that we don't get weary of living, even in the rough times. We can go on. They that wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up on wings as eagles. They will run and not weary. And they will walk and not faint. Now that's a little different. Walking doesn't sound very exciting. Some of you are parents. Some of you have teenagers, children at home. Today's what, the 23rd? It's been about 3-4 weeks. School's been out for most people. How many of you have already heard, I'm bored. There's nothing to do? I see some hands. I'm not blaming the kids. But I'm probably one of the older ones in the crowd here today. I have come to find out that life is not that entertaining most of the time. Life does not owe us a good time every day. We get up, we go to work, we mow the lawn, we do the dishes. Those are not fun things. And there are a lot of people that just sort of say, what's the use? But part of what God gives us is a sense of purpose, a sense that there is a reason to live life at its best. We can walk and not get tired of it. We can do those things that need to be done. They that hope in the Lord, trust in the Lord, they that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up on wings as eagles. They will run and not weary. They will walk and not faint. And the good news that Jesus Christ adds to that is that you don't have to do it alone. This morning in our earlier service, we had a young lady who had the good news that her illness was not cancer. And she said more than anything else, it was the people of this church and other friends who rallied around her, stuck with her. They couldn't cure her. They couldn't make it right, but she was not alone. You know, I've spent a lot of my life in my work working with people with addictions, all kinds of addictions, alcohol, drugs. And I think one of the biggest roadblocks to recovery from an addiction is those people who get to the point that they think there's no way out. I've tried everything and nothing works. If any of you happen to know someone who happens to be a recovering person, there's a book that one of the early groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote. In fact, a copy of it in our library. I looked. And in that book, Alcoholics Anonymous uses in helping people. By the way, AA is celebrating, I think, its 78th anniversary this month. It's been around for a while to help people. But in that book is one chapter that a lot of people who read it end up loving. It says, there is a solution. A simple thing, but when you're in the middle of a problem that you see no way out of, when you feel like everything has failed, whether it's a marriage, it's an illness, whether it's, I'm alone, someone has died, whatever those hard times of life really are, to just have someone simply say, there is a way. It can be different. It can get better. That's why I love what Isaiah said. Some of you have been in a place like that. I've had some times in life that are like that. It's part of living. But we don't have to do it alone. That's what this congregation is about. This is not a congregation of perfect people, but a congregation of people who stick by each other. We can't always cure your illness. We can't always mend the relationship that's causing some problems. We can't always make things right. But we can be there to let you know that you're not alone.